Okay, you guys got the notice. We are recording this meeting. We're gonna have this topic in the next meeting as well. But I definitely wanted to explore this topic in this group to get some different perspectives. We're gonna be talking about sacrifice, self-sacrifice, those that we make. So not the kind that are done in like ritualistic offerings, given to gods, or the sacrifices that people talk about for fame or whatnot. But we are talking about the sacrifices we make for other folks, the sacrifices that we make in our lives, whether we know or have knowledge of them or we don't have knowledge of them, right? So, any questions come up, we're just gonna try to run through this presentation really quick. Thoughts that come to mind, questions that come to mind, go ahead and jot them down or throw them in the chat, and then we'll open up the discussion at the end. All right. A few years ago, oh, let me start my timer. I always forget to start that timer. But anywho, there was a few years ago, there was a man in New York taking the subway with his two daughters, and he witnessed a man fall into the train tracks because he was having a seizure. At that same time, he also noticed that there was a light coming, there was an oncoming train. So here you have this man having a seizure, he's in danger, and this guy decides that he's going to jump on top of him, right, to hold him down steady. And the train ends up just passing over them. So he didn't get harmed and the man didn't get harmed. But if that had not been the circumstance, right, then this man it would be two lives lost, right? And the daughters of this father would have a tragedy. And I'm sure they were affected in some way, seeing their dad jump on top of this man. And when he was interviewed, right, they asked him, like, why did you do that? And he said he did it because he had to make a split decision and he thought it was the right thing to do. Like, he didn't have any benefit in doing that, right? But he felt it was the right thing to do. So, more than likely, it is part of his values. The article really didn't explain that, but it definitely jumped into a little bit of research into why might people make these sacrifices for other individuals. It's not someone that he knew, it wasn't a family member, it was indeed just a stranger. And some people have that type of compassion. Now, today, it's my opinion that we look down on that type of compassion. We see it more as a weakness. But there's a bunch of studies, and there's one in particular. It was published October 2014, and it was exploring whether like self-sacrifice was something driven by like not wanting to be embarrassed, not wanting to be seen as a bad person, or was it because we have compassion or concern for other people, like genuinely, right? So today I just want to explore our own motives for making the sacrifices that we do. I have talked with a bunch of folk who feel people on the receiving end of their generosity, on the receiving end of their sacrifice, are ungrateful, or they make a sacrifice because they feel like they don't have a choice due to whatever role they're in, or maybe they have people that they have to take care of, right? And so it doesn't become something that aligns with who they are and what they believe. Instead, it becomes a burden. And then there's all these feelings of resentment that start to build up in their connections. And then that resentment turns into unhappiness, and that unhappiness turns into stress, and that stress turns into illness, right? How do I know? I'm not just saying it because people tell me. I'm saying it because I've also had my own personal experiences where sacrificing for my children, that's something that I think is a given, right? Children are a gift. It's a gift of love. It comes with the job. So if you don't want to make sacrifice, you don't have children. And you make a sacrifice because you want things to be better for your children. You want to give them the most that you can. You want to give them the best cushion, okay, the best scenario that you can so that they can go on to thrive, right? So we see it as an act of love. But I've been in relationships and had connections, whether that's going to be with partners or friends or family, whatever it is, even on the job, right? because I expected a certain outcome or a certain reward because of what I was doing or my sacrifice. It's not that anybody made that agreement with me or entered into a contract with me, but it was something that I definitely had an expectation for. And so I felt like I'm making the sacrifice for the both of us, or the sacrifice, and you're going to see that sacrifice and then you're going to respond in a certain way. And when that response did not come, it definitely left a sour taste in my mouth. Right. And that can happen in our own connection. So for me, being able to address that situation and instead of feeling weighed down by those things, I really reframing. I talk about that a lot lately, but reframing was something that played an important part of me examining the decisions I was making to make a sacrifice and looking at it from different aspects and perspectives and deciding how I want to show up in the world, right? And if it was something, I had to be honest about whether it was something that I had to give. Like, did I have it to give? And if I was going to be complaining about giving it, then there was no point in me doing it, right? So I just thought this was a good topic to explore because I've seen self-sacrifice break a lot of people down and be one of those things that depletes people's faith, depletes their motivation, or at least affects their outlook of what they believe is possible and what can they're in their becoming, right? So it's just one of those things that can pull us into a particular negative look. Okay, so I want to start with looking at a little bit of the definition because I want to bring that a bigger word in there, which is altruism. So let me go ahead and get the presentation pulled up for today. Let's go ahead and run through that really quick and get into the discussion. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. Okay, cost and reward of sacrifice. So we'll look at this, the definition of sacrifice. If we're talking about a ritual sacrifice, it's an act of slaughtering an animal or a person or giving up a possession. That's a misspelling right there. And then we have self-sacrifice, and that's an act of giving up something valued, and we're the ones placing value on it, right? Not the person who's receiving. The person who is giving is the one who places the value on it for the sake of something else regarded as more important or worthy. And we are the ones who are deciding what's more important, what's more worthy. And then you have altruism. And so that is the belief or the practice of um, disinterest and selflessness, right? Because you have concern for the well-being of another individual, right? So this is when altruism, just want to introduce that word into our vocabulary. Because if you're looking up any type of research, it that word is going to be better for you to look at and get some information on what you're looking for, okay? So I wanted to point out the definitions of sacrifice and altruism, because a lot of times when I've thought of sacrifices I made in relationships and when I've heard it used, it's a feeling of like giving a piece of yourself, something that you cannot get back, or giving up something of value that can't be used again, right? So once it's one and done, and we can sometimes, if it doesn't return the value, we have a value on it. And if we feel like there's not a return on that value, then it leaves us feeling some type of way, right? So there's that feeling of giving up a piece of yourself, giving up something of value, and it doesn't benefit you in any way. But is that truly sacrifice if we're giving it for a benefit, right? The thing I like to talk about all the time, because it's something very simple. If you're sacrificing your time or you're sacrificing your health, right? Because people say when people don't have anything and they give you something anyway, like that's a true act of love, right? Because they're giving from nothing, even though we say you can't take blood from a turnip, but we're giving from nothing, right? And so that's viewed as being a true act of selflessness. Maybe you are performing some tasks for your employer, right? Despite what time you have, despite what your health is. Not enough people came to work that day, so I'm going to go ahead and come in. So when a promotion comes up, right, then there may be an expectation to get that promotion because you've been showing up in the time of need, right? Maybe that job ends involuntarily, right? It comes time for layoffs. And then you would want that sacrifice that you've made. And especially if it's been something consistent, right? That type of loyalty would have some type of value and maybe prevent the layoff from affecting you at that time, or, whoever they're keeping on. So, if it doesn't happen though, there can be this feeling of betrayal or feeling like you've been overlooked. And there's a feeling of an investment, right? And we place the value on that investment. And then we start feeling like we made that investment for no reason, because if I was able to hold on to that time, if I was able to hold on to that energy, I could have placed it here, or I could have placed it there, and then something different would have happened, right? But that's not where we are. We did give that investment. We did make that choice. And now this is where we are. So if we sacrifice our goals or vision to support or help our partner achieve their goal or their vision, right? And somehow the relationship falls apart, then we feel betrayed in that same way, just like with our employer. And we might start viewing that experience as a setback because the energy we invested there could have been invested for ourselves, and maybe it would have resulted in better success, right? Or it would have been more successful, or something different could have happened. We could have taken 2 steps forward, right? And so when people start thinking of submission and that type of conversation comes up, I've noticed sacrifice becomes something as well. I'm the one having to pay the bills. I'm the one having to do this and this and this and this, right? There's value being placed on the energy being expended and the tasks that are being completed between two people in a connection, whether it's going to be a friendship or family members helping family members, or we're in this relationship, right? So if it doesn't go the way that it should go, if something more value doesn't come out of it, because that's why we're making the sacrifice, right? Then that choice we made is now viewed as wasteful. Okay, even though we voluntarily make the choice to invest our time, that's how we viewed it at that time. We're making an informed decision based on all the information that we have. So whatever time, energy, and resources we invested, that's done out of love. Like once you give a gift to somebody, you don't get to decide how that gift is going to be used. And that's probably not going to be the last time you hear me say that. That's my personal opinion, but definitely weigh in on that. Okay. I definitely welcome some pushback on that idea. Okay. But if we don't receive that expected return on the investment, then we might start feeling like we had to do it, right? Because if I don't do it, this person's not going to think that I love them. This person's not going to think that I support them. This person's not going to see me as fulfilling the role that I have, not fulfilling the title, mother, daughter, pastor, best friend, whatever it is, right? We're not going to meet the responsibility or what the other person expects of us. Okay. So then when we're doing that, we give up our agency, right? We give up the choice, and it becomes easier to be the victim and get caught up in victim mentality rather than trying to cop to, well, I don't want to do it because of this. I don't want to do it because I don't want to be seen as a bad person. And I know that I'm not a bad person, so I'm going to do it. But we do it begrudgingly, right? So before we dive in, understand that this is a topic that is not about blaming or shaming. So I don't want us to get into those type of things, but I want it to be more about recognizing our ability to choose, right? And then being accountable for that choice instead of wanting to make someone else accountable. And see how that feels to you throughout this presentation. Mold that around a little bit, okay? Because when we see that our sacrifice as something voluntary, then we do step into an energy of empowerment, and our choice stops being a heavy weight that we're carrying around and something that's holding us back or holding us down. And we accept the intentional offerings that we're making. And when we accept those intentional offerings, we also accept our ability not to make that offering, right? So when we view a sacrifice as an obligation, or we're thinking that we're giving up a piece of ourselves, that can't be built again, that, that value can't be placed where it can grow, then we're putting ourselves in a position to feel resentment and to allow that resentment to grow. The more we sacrifice, the more resentment grows. Okay. It's also not uncommon for us to believe that like someone owes us for what we volunteered to give up, right? So we make a sacrifice, things don't work out. Well, now I need something. You should be able to give that to me, right? Because again, we've placed a value on it, and that value has not been met or increased. So somebody has to do something, and it's not us. It's not us because we weren't responsible for growing that investment. We've now made the other person responsible for growing that investment, right? So this is about what happens if we actually take ownership of that choice to make that sacrifice and let that like free us from the cage of victimhood. Does it open up an opportunity for growth, for development? Okay. Does it open up an opportunity to reclaim the power behind why we chose to invest our energy or resources in the first place? So those are the questions we are asking today, and that's mostly what we're going to talk about with the discussion, and then wherever the discussion leads. Okay. So let's hit on a sensitive topic with manipulation as far as being tied to our sacrifices. So with every sacrifice, right, we are either building trust or breaking that trust, depending on how we hold that in our minds. And so if we painted the picture, just the easy, let's not make it something life-changing. It can be something like a friend who says, you guys, maybe your work spots are on the same route, right? Something happens to your car, it's in the shop. And so you need to save up a couple of paychecks to get your car repaired. Your friend says, oh, don't worry about it. Where do you work? Okay, that's on the way to when I'm going to work. I could just swoop by there and pick you up, right? And you're thinking, oh, that's cool. My friend's willing to help me. Do you need anything? No, I don't need anything. It's already on my way, right? That's the agreement. So now you're in a position thinking, all right, I can get to work still. Thank goodness for my supportive friend. It's already on the way. You offered something. They said no, they don't need anything. That's it, right? Maybe a couple of times they bring you lunch or they invite you out to lunch, right? But it does require them maybe to get up a little bit earlier, so they can make that stop to pick you up and they can make that stop to drop you off. Maybe you get off later than them by 30 minutes or something, so they just have to wait for you to get off, after they're off or whatever. But every time they're picking you up, right? There's like a little bit of a reminder. Oh, there's something that there's a little bit of a reminder, right? Like, oh, I had to, I missed breakfast today because I had to get up a little bit earlier and I was in a rush, but I wanted to make sure that you got to work on time, right? Or they just use something to throw it back at you later, right? After, oh, since I'm doing this or whatever, let's say you get your car fixed, the arrangement's not going, and then your friend gets them, maybe they need a babysitter. Well, can you babysit for me tonight? Oh, no, I'm not going to be able to do it. After all that I did for you and you had your car in the shop, right? They find a way to throw it back in your face, okay? So we can have those type of arrangements. We can be on the receiving end, but there are times when we're the person dishing it out, right? We have those emotional IOUs where we are creating this mental ledger, right? We keep in score in our minds. Oh, I did this for you, so you should do this for me. There's like this expectation for a return on the investment. And usually it's not something that like we've spoken up and said, okay, if I do this for you, like some people will say that, okay, you owe me one, right? They put in the favorite, they got a favorite in the bank. So just know if I do this, then I'm going to call on you to do something. Okay. That's not a hidden contract. But a lot of times we'll say that we're okay with it, right? And then we won't voice what we want the contract to be. What if your friend really needed the gas money, right? So they're thinking, okay, this is my friend. They don't have to get the Uber or Lyft to work. So maybe they'll give me $5 or $10 for gas or whatever, since they're saving money. But they won't say that, right? They just say, oh, because we're friends, that's what's going to happen. So there's this hidden expectation. Okay. What they're doing with the, oh, I did all this for you. You can't babysit for me. That's that guilt tripping, right? Feeling that a little bit of that pressure, right? Because I'm feeling like you're not being grateful. I went out of my way for you, and I get that this is something that you would be going out of your way for, but you can't do it for me. I mean, I would do it for you, right? So we pressure people into being grateful, trying to twist how they feel about a situation. They're not saying no because they don't want to do it. They're just saying no because it realistically, they can't meet your need at that time, right? It doesn't mean that they don't love you. Even if we're saying no, it doesn't mean that we don't love the person. It doesn't mean that we won't continue to support the person. It's just that this particular situation, it's not a go, right? But them or us, if you ever tell somebody, if you really cared about me, you do this. If you really love me, you do this, right? That's that guilt tripping, right? So this is when we need to be accountable and question ourselves about why we made the choice in the first place. Did we actually offer our time, our resources, our energy because we were expecting something from that individual? That's the part of accountability on our sacrifice we have to face, right? Because when we start examining what's going on, we see that we set up these unspoken expectations that the person on the receiving end didn't even agree to. And that is straining their relationship. We might view it as the other person, oh, they're straining their relationship because they're not showing up to be supportive. They're not showing any gratitude to all that I do for them. But we are actually playing a big part in the strain on that relationship and eroding of trust because we have these hidden contracts. Okay. And sometimes we're just used to it. That's how we've been treated in our lives. And so it just becomes something that we do. And that's why I say unknowingly, it becomes a pattern of behavior for us because that's what we're usually on the receiving. We're used to being on the receiving end. And so we think this is just how things work, right? We can't understand why the other person might be upset or why they might feel uncomfortable, why it might cause a little stress on their end. Especially when you're being accused of being disingenuous or unsupportive, ungrateful, right? It's questioning the value of your relationship, all right? So we've had parents, or we have people that we've been engaged with in our formative years who may have conditioned us that this pattern of behavior is normal. And that's why I'm big about examining choices, because you can choose different than what you were raised, positively or negatively, right? You could go away from a good thing, okay? And you can go away from a bad thing. It's all in our choices. So when we're saying things like, oh, this is just how I am, then we also have to recognize that we're voicing that it's our choice to operate this way, to love this way, to engage this way. And so then we have to be open to other people's choices and how they respond, right? And I'm not saying that a different choice is easy to make, right? But acknowledgement of our choices is a huge part of accountability and our self-acceptance, accepting who we are, and that everybody's not going to respond to us the way we want them to. As a matter of fact, sometimes we have a double standard of that, right? If someone was doing the same thing that we're doing to them, how would we respond? Will we find it just to respond that way if we're on the receiving end? Because if we find it just to respond that way when we're on the receiving end, it's also just to have the response given to us, right? It's also just for someone to react that way with us. All right. So we talked about self-acceptance a few weeks ago and that being a factor of self-love, but it's okay to have weaknesses, and we do. Again, it's all about choice and whether we want to work on it or we don't want to work on it. Okay. That's the honesty of it. When we say this is just how I am, that is an admission of I am comfortable. I accept this about me. I do not want to do anything different. But it doesn't mean that people have to respond to us in a certain way or have to submit to how we engage. If it's not working for them and it's not in alignment for them, everybody gets that choice, right? So let's circle back to the study about why we might endanger ourselves or risk deficits in our lives, right? Because a lot of us see a sacrifice as something that we're giving up, right? So why would we give up something to support somebody else, right? There's the study here. I put it there at the bottom, right here. The study that I was referencing there's the title. His name is Oriel Feldman Hall is how I say it. There's some other authors to the study as well, but you should be able to find it with this information. And basically with this study, participants were being measured for their compassionate concern versus their personal distress. And this happened in the UK. Personal stress is like when you're giving begrudgingly, like, oh, I don't want to be seen as the only person not doing it, or I don't want to be seen as a bad person, so I'm going to go ahead and do it, right? And basically, they gave each person 20 pounds. And each person had to decide if they were going to give up a portion of that money. I think it was a pound. If they're going to give up a portion of that money to prevent someone that they did not know from being punished. They weren't administering the shocks, but they had recorded them acting as if they were being shocked, right? And so I think it's a 60s or 70s study that was kind of doing the same thing. And they found that some people were willing to save themselves, right? And punish the other person even up to death. This was about having to give up money. So not money that they earned, it was given to them. And maybe some people saw that, this is something additional. I have it to give. It's not hurting me to give it. Anywho, they had to decide, am I going to give up this dollar to prevent this person or this pound to prevent this person from being harmed? So no one was actually harmed, but the videos that they saw, the fake videos they saw, made it look like the outcomes of somebody being shocked, right? And so while they were viewing the videos and making choices, then their brains were being scanned and the activity. And basically, the findings were saying that compassionate people sacrifice more money to prevent harm, okay? So also the same people, the part of their brain that was activated was their pleasure and reward circuits. So it was showing up something like maternal love, like you're keeping somebody safe, which means that they're acting in a way that is in line with their values. They believe that they're doing the right thing, so they feel comfortable. They feel resolved in this decision that they're making. Now, people who, some people would say, oh, that was a selfish decision to make, then they were showing conflict and distress, right? Like, I know I probably should make this choice, but I also need this money, right? So they weren't necessarily feeling resolved in their choices. Okay, so it's like, I don't want to do it, but how are people going to view me? And sometimes we're in that situation, right? Because we don't want to be viewed in a bad way, but you can't please all of the people all of the time. So basically with this report, it found that sacrifice is something that is compassionate, right? So if that's something that you value, then you're not going to have any problem making a sacrifice. And more than likely, you're not going to expect anything in return because you're compassion driven. And it's not just about trying to reduce your personal discomfort, right? You're actually wanting something to happen good. You're concerned about the well-being of the other individual. But we see compassion as a weakness, right? So a lot of the times we have to also consider, am I being taken advantage of? Like, is this person trying to finesse me, that comes into play. And I say that because most of the time, when we're compassionate or when we make sacrifices, like that's not getting the praise, that's not getting the reward, or we're not getting the return that we should. So people might look on and be like, oh, you're a fool for doing that, or you're stupid for doing that. And then we start to talk to ourselves that way. And we start thinking, okay, I need to change something. A lot of times what we need to change is our boundaries. We need to change how we view accountability. We need to accurately assess if we're able to make that sacrifice, right? So it's important to be discerning of folks as well. Pay attention to patterns of behavior. If it's not in alignment with your values, then you don't do it. That's the decision. Can it be difficult because of what people might say, how they might try to make you look like a bad person with other individuals? Of course. But again, that doesn't have to be the truth. A couple of things could be happening at the same time. You can be a great person, just not able to make that sacrifice. All right. Okay, so the truth is there will be people who misuse generosity or, take more than they ever give. But you also have the option, the choice to say no. No is a very powerful word. Okay. So just because that person chooses to do that doesn't mean it has to be a burden that we carry. For me, if I'm not getting a return on my investment, I don't consider it a loss because I'm honest with myself now about why I'm making the investment. Before, I wasn't very honest, right? It'd be like, if I make this sacrifice, then this person's going to see me as a loving individual. No, that person's going to, some people I had surrounded myself with, that person was just seeing the opportunity, right? They were an opportunist with me making the sacrifice. It had nothing to do with who they were and who I was. It had everything to do with me not having boundaries and me not being honest about my ability to make the sacrifice and what I wanted in return. Because there were a few times in my younger years when I wanted something in return, whether it was love, whether it was a better position, like I'm making all this sacrifice on this particular project, right? Expecting to be able to do something better and better my situation, but then that didn't happen, right? So I could spend my time being mad at that individual, but it ended up being something that taught me something as well, right? So even though I was gaining some skills, I really didn't see it that way. It was just like, wow, they took all of this from me, they took all of that from me, but I actually offered it up, right? Without making my contract, my request, my return on my investment known. And so something I had to become a little bit smarter about. Even when I was listening to people tell me things about like what kind of projects I was invested in or how I help people on their projects, you know what I mean? I have to know, again, revisiting that question of why am I doing this in the first place? And if it's aligning with who I am, my values, my outlook on life, then nobody can tell me that the yes is wrong or that the no is wrong. They can say whatever they want to say, but they can't dictate whether what my choice is wrong or not. Only I do that, right? Only I can be accountable for gains and losses. The other person cannot, right? Even if somebody took, and I started to decide that too, even if somebody takes advantage of a situation, then it's a pattern of behavior that I did not see. Does it make it right? No, but it definitely taught me something, right? Now I got to take those lessons, what it taught me, and I have to apply it to life moving forward. And if I don't choose to do that, that's on me. That's my perspective. So I'm not reading all the messages, but we're about to get into it. We're about to get into it. Okay. So the science is self-sacrifice. There's something going on with our nervous system. There's a benefit to us making a sacrifice, even though a lot of times we feel that there's not. And that benefit is when it aligns with our value system. Because there's a reward, okay, emotional reward, motivational reward we receive when we're in alignment with who we are and our values. and our nervous system is affected in a very positive way. And we, a lot of the times, don't realize how crucial our nervous system is, right? The role that it plays in moving forward and kind of holding ourselves back a little bit, where we grow our mindset, right? We have that growth mindset, or we stay in lack. So there's a lot of physical things that are happening there, playing into the fawn, fight, flight, or freeze, right? So that as well. And then when we're talking about this system, it's a flow of give and take. So knowing when to do so and how to make that move is very important. Sacrifice is supposed to be a gift to the receiver, right? But it's also building something in us as well. And that is the reward. The receiver is not responsible for the reward. Does that make sense? I know we're going to debate that in just a minute. So what are the rewards exactly? As far as our relationships, we have this flow of safety and generosity, right? There's no strings attached. I used to say that too, going out with friends and things like that. I didn't want to be in a friend group where there were people who were always going to be takers. I preferred to be in a group of people who were givers and takers. So I might go out and, I'll be the one who pays this time. Or maybe we go out and I'm going to take care of the hotel arrangements. You're going to take care of dinner. But there was never a feeling of, oh, this person's, always eating off me. I didn't like that energy. So it has a benefit to our relationships when we're not having these hidden contracts, right? Expecting the receiver to return on our investment, especially when we're the ones placing the value on it. When we're practicing conscious sacrifice, meaning that we're making that choice to do so, then we give freely and it becomes a source of growth. It becomes something in alignment, speaks to our spirituality and our growth in that area, right? Sometimes it's building the ability to delay gratification. When we have boundaries, people notice our patterns of behaviors as well. So they know what they can do and what they can't do because we're very consistent with who we are, right? So if you have boundaries, people are going to pay attention to those things. And then we'll tend to surround ourselves with like energy because it's an easy flow. People who are feeling a little like lofty and happy, content, they're satisfied with life. It's difficult to be around individuals who are always complaining about life. So they don't spend as much time. And you'll notice that as you are more true to yourself, you'll want to be that. It doesn't mean that people have to do the same thing. It doesn't mean that people have to have the same level of success. It doesn't mean that people have to come from the same social class, but it means that people are generally happy with who they are and how they exist in the world. That alone can strengthen our character, strengthen our support systems. When we're making sacrifices, we could prove that we could choose something that's bigger than comfort, right? We can, did I say delay gratification? I think I said that already, but there is power in our choice, okay? If you're the Bible type, then you already know, I think it's Proverbs 11. There's other scriptures. There's a ton of scriptures about, giving with a glad heart and what kind of blessings that can bring. Because distress is an emotional frequency that interrupts the flow. The law of attraction is something that is popular in conversation, is popular in content and all that stuff. But usually people don't talk about the other universal laws because the law of attraction is a universal law, right? And so it's like, if this thing happened, this thing's going to happen too. There's this end of the spectrum, and there's always this end of the spectrum as well. There's this give and take and this flow, right? But we also place less emphasis on the fact that we attract the vibration that matches us, like the vibration that we're living in, not the one that we desire. And a lot of people, I've watched a lot of law of attraction people, and it's that same kind of thing, matching the energy. Um, it's not just about having the vision, but it's about matching the action for the vision as well. And we could be doing that thing, but not really wanting to do that thing. And if so, then that's not you're not in the energy. You're in the energy of distress. You're in the energy of duress. You're in the energy of I have to. There's no there's no gain. It's all pain, no gain. Right? So that's never gonna you're never gonna emit that aura. You're never gonna have that authenticity to what you're doing. So I'm talking in those terms, but even if we weren't talking in those terms of people who are religious or read the Bible and things of that sort, think about how likely you are to approach a person who looks upset for directions. You're lost, you need directions. You're most likely going to avoid a person who has a mean face, who's standing alone, who's kind of off-putting, because you're already thinking that they're not willing to help. They're not giving off that vibe. They're not carrying that aura. But if you see someone smiling and engaging folk, right, you might feel more comfortable approaching them because you believe there's going to be a a better probability of engaging with them, right? And even if let's just say they don't have the information that you need, they maybe can connect you with someone who has the information. Like they're actually going to give a genuine effort to get you some information. Okay. But you're going to go for the energy that is most inviting. So if that's something that is not already embodied, that's what we read. Pattern of behavior. It's like, it's just something about that person. That's the person's aura. Okay. It's the energy that they're emitting. And that is what's being read. And it either gives the feeling of being something we can receive, that we can resonate with, or it gives the feeling to backing off. And everything has an energy, a frequency, right? Everything, not just people. So when you think about the law of attraction, think about that. Everything has a vibration. That's why it's a law. Anywho, so remember that reward or return, it's not something that's going to be guaranteed on our sacrifices. But when we're being authentic about offering this or offering that, right, then that can lead to indirect blessings when we can't put a finger on it directly. It may not come from the person, that gift, that appreciation and opportunity. It may not come from the same person that you sacrifice for. But often in ways we don't see where that's coming. That's why we have to be open to it. And if we are focused on just that line, right, receiving our return on the investment, then that distress is getting in the way of all the other channels. It's getting in the way of all the other vibrations moving through and getting close to you. So if you want to do self-sacrificing, you want to do something for someone, do that authentically, right? If you're doing it because there's something expected in return, then be able to voice that. Let that person have a choice on whether they're able to make a return on your investment, right? It's better that way. It's definitely a better model for trust. It's better for, respecting the relationship. It's better for opening opportunities, making things known. Okay, people feel safe around our generosity when they can trust it. And we know that is true because we probably recognize that as well. Oh no, I don't want to ask them for a favor because blah, 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 blah. You don't feel safe. You don't feel safe with your generosity. Okay. Let's wrap this up so we can get the talkie talk. I know I shared some examples, kind of gave some definitions, maybe threw a little bit of the Bible in there. We had a little bit of research as well. But what can we take away today? I like to always have something that we could take and apply to our lives day to day. So Take a moment and ask yourself, am I giving freely or am I secretly keeping score? If you find yourself feeling resentment or feeling unappreciated, then ask yourself why you feel that way. Is there a hidden contract, a hidden expectation that you need to reveal, that you need to communicate? Do you need to revisit why you're making that sacrifice? Maybe your why or reasoning has changed when you first started that agreement, right? And we can always make a different choice. So if we're having obligation, we feel like, oh, I have to do this because of this. That creates resentment. That creates distress. That's a clear sign of being misaligned, right? With what we believe, the choices that we want to make. So those are all things, even energetically, that's going to get in the way of the flow. Okay. So ask yourself, what needs to happen for release? What needs to happen so I can release this obstacle that's stopping the flow? Okay. Is it a question about being accountable for our decisions and being honest about what we're able to sacrifice? Do we need to open and communicate with our partner or friend, our employer or family member about our expectations or agreements? Let's go ahead and open that up, because if you are finding resentment creeping into your situations and your relationships because of something that you're providing, something that you feel like you're giving of yourself, first, remind yourself that you chose it, right? It's always a choice. And if you can't continue to choose it, especially out of love, then it's okay to set a boundary and then not give it at all, right? I know it means that we have to open ourselves up to commentary and how people feel, and people are going to feel comfortable enough for us to express their emotions. But true sacrifice is not about being in misalignment. It's not about losing yourself. It's not about feeling like you're being drained, right? It's about aligning yourself with something bigger, even if something bigger is not a personal return on the investment, even if that something bigger is not benefiting you directly. Being in alignment with your values, that is your benefit. That is the ultimate return. And it keeps you in the flow of giving and receiving. Okay. It's never going to matter who has more points. So when we're keeping score, it doesn't matter. There's never going to be value in keeping score. So let's open up some questions. I'm gonna put some questions in the chat. Before I close this out on the recording, I'm gonna post this recording. Discussion questions. Am I aware of when I'm sacrificing versus when I'm being coerced? When I'm feeling pulled in something, when I'm feeling guilt tripped. Okay. Have you ever secretly expected a repayment for your sacrifice? What was it? How did it make you feel? How'd that relationship go? Did it come to an end? Was there an opportunity for recovery? How'd that happen? What else? Oh, when we're making the choice, then how can we choose sacrifice in a way that aligns with our values and doesn't harm our sense of self-worth? I think I want to start with that, actually. Let's have that in the live discussion, okay? And talk about if we're able to release control of the outcomes, what we think should happen, that value that we place on our investment. Can we be okay with not receiving a personal benefit? So thank everybody for joining for the replay. We're gonna cut the recording right now. We still have the next group as well in 45 minutes. Probably won't post this recording by that time, but every Sunday, 11 a.m. Central Standard Time, 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. 12:30 p.m. is for the ladies only. All right. So thank everybody for joining us on the recording. If you're joining on the replay, And we'll see you next week. Let's get into this discussion, everybody. Give me a minute here. Let's stop the recording.